recorded, nor is it edited. It is live. And our Way to a Wonderful Life message for this morning is titled, Faith is the Evidence. Faith is the evidence. And as we've learned before, our thoughts create our faith. So whatever we think about, however our thoughts are directed, either towards the good or towards something not good, that becomes the evidence of our faith, and we shall see those things outpicture in our experience in some way, shape, or form. Now, the mystical Ernest Holmes tells us in his book, Living Without Fear, the outpush of mind through human activities is the self-realization of spirit, and when so understood, this outpush becomes invincible. Ideas come from the great mind, that is the spirit, through the human mind. The two are really one. But ideas can only come to the mentality that expects them and that opens its doors of thought to them so that they can enter and pass through into expression. That's why Jesus said, seek and ye shall find, knock and the door will be open unto you. But we must open the doors of our thought so that that idea that God has for us, that guidance, that direction that God is trying to bring to our awareness will come to our awareness so that we can heed that direction and that guidance and take those ideas and act upon them and realize a greater life experience. Now, the great Eric Butterworth, in his book, Discover the Power Within You, writes, whatever you have, no matter how seemingly inadequate, bless it. Even if you have no money and no food, bless your hands, bless your mind, bless your skills, bless your friends, bless the air you breathe and the sun that brings life. Bless everything, and your life will be blessed with riches undreamed of. When Jesus blessed the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, he subjected this evidence of substance to a ray as penetrating as any known to man. The symbols of bread and fish were still intact, but they were spiritually expanded far beyond the size indicated by their intrinsic words. So let's think about those words. Can we with genuine gratitude bless those things that we have, even though we may have a stack of bills that is giving us a feeling of helplessness and hopelessness and a feeling of desperation, or we're going through a physical challenge, an illness, or a disease that makes us feel like somehow we're trapped in a physical body that doesn't work for us anymore. How many of us can bless the things that we have? We can if we just take our mind off the things of the physical, off the things of the world, and be still. Be still and know that I am God. Sit down and be still. Be still and clear your mind. Say, right here, right where I am, I'm going to bless everything. Just as Eric Butterworth says, whatever you have, no matter how seemingly inadequate, bless it. Even if you have no money and no food, bless your hands, bless your mind, bless your skills, bless your friends, bless the air that you breathe, the sun that brings life. Bless everything, and your life will be blessed with riches undreamed of. When Jesus blessed the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, he subjected this evidence of substance to a ray as penetrating as any known to man. The symbols of bread and fish were still intact, but they were spiritually expanded far beyond the size indicated by their intrinsic worth. In other words, far beyond the size indicated by the physical presence of them. That was from Eric Butterworth from his book, Discover the Power Within You. Our faith has an attractive power that cannot be described in words, and that is good because words could only serve to limit that which is unlimited in its capacity. I recently read that we are to give of that which we desire to receive, and I think this is certainly has a certain point to it. In other words, if we desire to receive money, then we should give money. If kindness is what we want to receive more of, then we should be very kind at every opportunity to do so. If this enters into our mind that we need more of anything, then we must bless that which we see. If your leg is giving you trouble, your knees are giving you trouble, if your hips are giving you trouble, start blessing your knees, blessing your hips, blessing your hands, blessing your fingers, blessing the hair on your head, bless everything about your spirit, your physical body, until you bring it into that higher realm of God intelligence working through you. And see yourself in that image and likeness that God has created each of us in. God has an image, likeness of each and every one of us. But if our image, likeness of ourselves doesn't match that image, likeness that God has of us, then we will find something in our life that's not right. Whether it be a physical, a financial, a mental, emotional, or a spiritual issue, something will be out of balance. We must get ourselves back to that image, likeness that God has created us in, and start realizing that we are spirit having a human experience, and in the spirit we will find our joy and our happiness, our peace and our harmony, our love and our beauty that God has made resident within each and every one of us. This is what true tithing is all about. It is directing our mind to a conscious action of recognizing what we are causing. We are causing something with our thoughts. What am I causing? That's what we need to bring ourselves back to. When we get into that pattern of thinking, especially if it's a pattern of thinking a negative thought or a negative feeling about our health, about our finances, about our success, about our relationships, whatever they may be, we must redirect that thought towards the good, and say, no, within me is the power through my faith, through the thoughts that I direct into my mind, through the thoughts that create my mental household. Within me is the power to transform my life, to renew my mind, to refresh my consciousness towards that which is what I want to experience rather than towards that which I don't want to experience. We must be conscious of what we are doing and recognize that when we give money, we should expect to receive money. Yet we must always be conscious that we are not expecting our kindness or our money to be received from those to whom we give them. Our giving, whether it be money or kindness, should be given freely and void of obligation on our part or on the part of others. Freely give and freely receive is the instruction from the Mastermind Jesus, and it is a principle that we can depend on when we realize that the Spirit will give through us and to us when our mind is free of obligation or indebtedness. I will always remember and never forget when I was going through my ministerial training, I spoke at a church in the south central area of Los Angeles, and on the bulletin of the church for that day, the minister had printed the words prior to the collection that she asked people to give from their heart, but to never give out of obligation. To give from their heart, but to never give out of obligation. Why? Obligation ties us to something in the physical, something in the world. With God, there's no obligation. God gives freely, and we must imitate that likeness of God's givingness, livingness, and forgivingness in our own life experience. And as we do, then we free our mind to accept a greater good than most of us could imagine. So freely give and freely receive is the instruction from the Mastermind Jesus, and Jesus was a genius as well as other things. He was a spiritual genius, a man of high intelligence and high enlightenment. So it is a principle that we can depend on when we realize that the Spirit will give through us and to us when our mind is free of an obligation or indebtedness. Eric Butterworth, in his book, Discover the Power Within You, takes this principle of giving and receiving to another level as the act of blessing. Why do we bless? Because we want to fill our mind with having, fill our mind with the havingness, fill our mind with that we have something. As Jesus tells us in the parable of the talents, he who has little will have even less and may lose all that he has, but he who has much will have even more still, because the mind that realizes that it has something is a richer consciousness and will attract to it that something more, that expanded good. Blessing that which seems woefully inadequate requires faith, yet faith has a level of chemistry to it that will not only attract a greater good to us, it will also lift our mind above the seeming appearance of inadequacy. No matter what conditions we may find ourselves in, using the power of our mind, we can transcend them. No one is without this power, no one. But often we will let the conditions or circumstances that we confront convince us that we are powerless to do anything about them. This happens for many reasons. Often it is because we have lived with the condition or the circumstance so long that we see it as our reality, and those around us have supported us in believing this is so. Let's look at that again. No one is without this power, but often we will let the conditions or circumstances that we confront convince us that we are powerless to do anything about them. This happens for many reasons. Often it is because we have lived with the condition or the circumstance so long that we see it as our reality, and those around us have supported us in believing this is so. And for many of us, there is an emotional attachment to our problems. An emotional attachment, shame and blame, self-pity, a belief in suffering, a belief in struggle, etc. Yet none of these are permanent or insurmountable. None of these. There's a power to our faith that's stronger than anything else. Let's go back to those words of Eric Butterworth when he said, when Jesus blessed the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, he subjected this evidence of substance to a ray as penetrating as any known to man. The symbols of bread and fish were still intact, but they were spiritually expanded far beyond the size indicated by their intrinsic worth. Now, a lot of people will say, well, yeah, Jesus did that, but I'm not Jesus. Well, Jesus said, these things I do, and greater things still shall you do. And people will say, oh, well, no, I don't think I can. But yes, we can. But we have to make the effort to do it. We must attempt to do it. We must seek in order to find. We must knock on the door of our consciousness in order to open our thoughts, open our mind, to be receptive to that which we are to do that's greater. And as we open our mind to that which we are receptive to do as greater, then we shall find ourselves doing that greater thing, even if it surprises us and everyone around us. When we feel overwhelmed, it is because we have overwhelmed ourselves. When we feel overwhelmed, it is because we have overwhelmed ourselves by not rejecting the thoughts and ideas that appear to limit us. We don't do this intentionally, and sometimes we don't even do it consciously, but we do. And I believe our self-esteem has something to do with this as well. In a world where comparisons are made constantly, and the use of words to negate our self-worth are daily being bantered about in daily conversations, the collective consciousness can have a powerful effect on our self-esteem. This makes it imperative that we consider Butterworth's instruction to bless everything that comes to our awareness, no matter how insignificant it may seemingly be. Now, let's go back there one more time. In a world where comparisons are made constantly and the use of words to negate our self-worth are daily being bantered about in daily conversations, the collective consciousness, that is the consciousness of all the people in the world, the media that we listen to, the politicians that we listen to, the religious people that we listen to, the friends and neighbors that we listen to, the family that we listen to, can have a powerful effect on our self-esteem. You know, this morning I was watching on CNN. They were talking about the governor's election in Texas, and that the one candidate for the governor, the GOP candidate, had this celebrity singer who said some horribly disgusting things about President Obama, had him campaigning with him, and Sarah Palin said, oh, well, if it's good enough for, if this guy is good enough for, what's his name, whoever the guy was, I can't even remember his name. I was so disturbed by the thought of it, and I said, get this out of your mind. He's good enough for me. In other words, she was agreeing with the man. And this is the kind of stuff that creates so much chaos in our world, so much hate, so much divisiveness, so much poverty and pain and illness, because it's so against that image likeness that God has for each and every one of us. Jesus said, love one another. Love one another. If you can't love one another, then at least leave them the hell alone, and don't be saying monstrous things about people who are living as the image and the likeness of God and the Spirit of God. We take that into our mind, and it creates this disturbance, and that disturbance affects our health, our finances, it affects everything, because if we believe it to be true, or if we believe that there's truth in it, then we have created the evidence of our faith that there's something always disturbing, there's something always negative, there's somebody always inferior, and guess what happens in our mind? Our mind has fostered and nurtured that possibility for ourselves, and as we do it, we shall seek it and we shall find it, because if we're thinking about it, if our thoughts are on it, it will show up. So let's erase that, eliminate that, get that out of our mind, and leave the politicians alone. Let's just leave them the hell alone and go on with our life today and enjoy our life and find that good that God has for us today. And by fostering and nurturing our inherent faith in the universal good and blessing those things that are ours now, we can begin to convince ourselves that it is possible to live the life that we desire to experience. Every good desire of our heart is ours to experience, to have, or to be, but we must be convinced first that this is so. It is not necessary or advisable to convince anyone else, including God. We have the ability and the capability to choose what it is that we are to be convinced of, and as long as it does not diminish the liberty or choice of anyone else, including ourselves, it is ours to work out for ourselves in our mind first, and we do this first, this mental work that is required to convince ourselves first that it is our truth. It is our thing to do, our thing to be, our thing to have. Just as the great Emma Curtis Hopkins said, there is good for me and I ought to have it, because God so loved the world that God has made every good thing available to us. If we just open our awareness to it, our mind to it, and get all that noise and nonsense, all that garbage talk from the world out of our thoughts, out of our mind. Just eliminate it, release it, let it go, cleanse our mind, refresh our mind, renew our mind, and let our mind be transformed towards the good, towards that greater good. And just as Jesus said, these things I do, and greater things than you have done will you do, if you just listen to me. Just cleanse your mind of all this stuff. Love one another. Love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. And keep your mind stayed on God, and all good things will be added unto you. That's what Jesus said, and it's the absolute truth. Some people continue to believe that we are subject to God's will. That as we look at the nature of God intelligently, we realize that if God would have a will for us, it would be that we choose to enjoy the infinite good that God has made available to us. Jesus taught that the kingdom of heaven is within you, not low here or low there. In other words, it is normal and natural to accept and receive the good that is ours and create our own heaven right here on earth. And as we do, we glorify God when we do. We glorify the Spirit of God, the love of God, the joy of God, the lovingness and the givingness and the forgivingness of God right where we are. But our mind must be open and receptive to that good. We must take it into our mind, let our mind be free of all things that are unlike the good. The Spirit within each and every one of us is alive and awake and aware. It is always available to us, closer to us than the very air that we breathe. And as we accept this as the truth for us, we accept that the God, the living Spirit, is intelligence and power. Just as Jesus said, the Father is a Spirit, and we must worship Him, give our attention to Him, trust in Him, see God in every living thing, love God in every living thing, then we shall find ourselves realizing a greater good that's so amazing and so marvelous and so wonderful that we almost want to say it's too good to be true. But in God, we know that no thing is too good to be true. In God, no thing is too good to be true. So let's go back to those words of the great Eric Butterworth before we end our program this morning. And listen to these words and take this into your mind and begin to act on this knowledge and wisdom from this great teacher of truth. He writes, whatever you have, no matter how seemingly inadequate, bless it. Even if you have no money and no food, bless your hands, bless your mind, bless your skills, bless your friends, bless the air that you breathe and the sun that brings life. Bless everything, and your life will be blessed with riches undreamed of. When Jesus blessed the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, he subjected this evidence of substance to a ray as penetrating as any known to man. The symbols of bread and fish were still intact, but they were spiritually expanded far beyond the size indicated by their intrinsic worth. In other words, they were far expanded beyond the physical evidence of them, because that penetrating ray of the Spirit, intelligence, power that God is, can do all things. With God, all things are possible. With mankind, there are things that seem impossible, but with God, all good things are possible. And so